This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. We are talking about the future of Brazilian coffee and producing Brazilian coffee. We are joined once again by Jonas, agronomist in Brazil. An agronomist, and Jonas. I'm no longer calling you by your name. I am only calling you by your title. And Jonas, let's have a chat about that. Like, if you look into the future of the next few years, as the world warms up and the climate shifts, and you can hear all those climate deniers into the far distant future going, but it's not real. Okay. You know what I mean? But what's the future of Brazilian coffee producing looking like?
Yeah, it's like I said in a previous episode, it's been challenging the last year. And one important thing that Brazil is changing in terms of production too, because if you take about 20 years ago, Brazil is just a place that you buy cheap coffee, commodity coffee. Nobody cares about quality or farms. So it's just a place to buy cheap coffee from roasters in order to give more volume to their Ethiopian or their Colombian coffee. But there we already have good coffees, but nobody care about. I saw year after year farmers more interested in growing high quality coffee, which is important because high quality coffee gives more profit for the farmers, so they could keep working in the field. And farmers start to look at coffee in a different way. Like we are talking a lot now in Brazil. About 2 years ago, farmers start to talk a lot and implement organic coffee in Brazil, which is fantastic, which is interesting, and people start to look about technology. It's important to know that organic coffee is so much harder to grow than traditional conventional coffee. It's more risky for the farmer, and the price is better, but in the end of the line, they get the same amount of money. I work with organic coffee farmers for 4 years, and in the end, it's almost the same because the yields is lower and the price is better, but the quality in terms of the farm area, so if you don't use agrochemicals and things like that, so the movement is growing and still growing. And now after the frost, we have a lot of farmers that are interested in agroforestry and regenerative agriculture, which is interesting because, we could use techniques to mitigate frost, like I told you in the previous episode, but the best techniques is agroforestry. So put trees over is a way to avoid frost, but we have to study this very, very well because coffee don't like so much shade. And the varieties that we develop in Brazil are developed for more than 100 years in terms of breeding in order to have good yields in full sun. So I'm now working with agroforestry too, with some farmers that we are implementing agroforestry in order to protect frost, have a more sustainable environmental and good yields. I always said agroforestry is a solution if the farmers had profit and good yields. If you want like a forest, grow forestry, a forest and grow coffee separately. This is an alternative in areas that are very risky for frost. So they need to put some trees because if the frost came in a very harsh way, no matter what a technique you use, that we will lost all the trees. So we are starting to study that, and I saw more farmers and researchers interested in order to have this idea of agroforest, doing a plan of agroforest, a project of agroforestry in order to have coffee under the trees.
Yeah, wow. This is where politics can play a huge role, right? Because if you,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who the government in charge is, we saw that under Bolsonaro, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
Amazon was being
Mm-hmm.
destroyed to give way for agricultural, particularly beef, from what I understand. That the Amazon was being destroyed to make room for beef farming. How would something like that influence the way that coffee was being used? Sorry, that regenerative farming. How do you call it? Regenerative
Yeah.
agroforestry?
Yeah, regenerative farming could be without agroforestry.
Okay.
Agroforestry is one technique to do that,
Okay.
because in terms of some crops for like corn, we
Yep.
can't put it under the
The
forest.
forest.
So
No.
yeah, it's
Right.
not work. But we could use different techniques of soil conservation, for example.
Right.
In terms of government, this is people ask me if coffee are related to Amazon deforestation, and Amazon deforestation, it's a problem for more than 100 years in Brazil,
Okay.
and always it's more about, I always said it's more about the trees than the crops, because the trees in the forest worth so much more than the soybean, for example. But when you take all the trees out and make money, you have a free area to put cattle, and or grow soy or grow any kind of
Right.
crops that you want. But in terms of crop development, the Amazon area is not good for growing stuff or to have cattle, because it's so much wet. We have rains every year, during the whole
All
year.
year round.
So yeah, there are better areas to grow crops than there. But people go there and do mining, which is
Yep.
a huge problem. Yesterday, I was watching a TV show in Brazil that talking about the mining in the forest in Amazon
Mm-hmm.
for gold. So they are mining the land. So they take the forest out, sell the trees that worth, and then start to wash the ground to take gold, to dig gold.
Yep.
And then they sometimes use a kind of vacuum to suck the bottom of the river, because there's gold there too. So they put all this dirt that was stabilized in the ground and take mining. So any kind of crop that grow in Amazon is the consequences of deforestation, because like I said, like a tree of mahogany,
Yep.
right?
Mahogany. Yep.
Worth about, let me say, being about 50 to 60,000,
Yep.
$60,000 in the market, in the not legal
Wow.
market of wood.
The
So
black
it's just
market.
one tree. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's why people go there to explore. So the land is
Right.
flat. So let's use for different stuff to grow crop, for example, because the soil from Amazon is not very fertile. It's just fertile because the perfect circle of trees and leaves going in the ground. But if you take this is why it's a huge problem, because where you take the leaves out, the trees out, the soil is not fertile enough to grow again a forestry. Because one thing that people don't know, if we have so much rain over the soil for thousands of years, the nutrients are washing from the ground. So the trees make the
absorb it.
cycle perfect. Yeah, because they take the nutrients, pull to the leaves and branches and fall on the ground and absorb again and again and again like a perfect circle. So if we take the trees out, the soil have no good fertility. So it's in some places I saw in Amazon, we saw think like a sand in some areas.
Wow.
Because of this problem of, this is the huge problem of Amazon. If we take the forest out, it's very hard to the forest to regenerate again because of this problem of the soil.
Now, Brazil just had huge rains, right?
Yeah.
How did that affect coffee?
Yeah, in January and February until now we have about 10 days without so many rains, but the month of January we have rains almost every day. This is good for coffee in some way because water is the basic for any kind of plant. They need water, but the problem now that farmers are facing is first is about replanting some areas, because if the soil is very wet, it's like butter, so very moisty, so we can't go there and put some young trees in the field. So farmers already have the seedlings to plant, but they need to wait until the soil have a lower drains, and they could like dig in the soil and put the seedlings there. So it's delay a little bit our planting season in about 20 days. Now that I saw farmers start to put the seedlings in a massive way in the fields, this is one aspect that delay a little bit our planting season, which is risky too, because usually after March, the rain is stopped. So if the tree will not be a long time in the field in terms to stabilize, they are very sensitive to drought during the season, because the roots are still closed in the area that we have the soil in the container. So this is the first problem that we face. And then disease. The coffee leaf rust, which most of the coffee people know, which affect many countries around the world, it still affect some places in Brazil. So with high humidity levels, the coffee leaf rust propagates very fast. So, and the only way to fight back the coffee leaf rust, it's using some kind of fungicide, which could be an agrochemical, like usual agrochemical, or some organic lecithin salts based in copper that we use in organic farming, that need to be sprayed over the leaves in order to protect the leaves. But because of the rain, we can't use the sprays over the trees. So I start to saw many places with some fungi on the leaves. And now, thanks God, the rain stops for 10 days and people start to use the protection from the trees. It's important to say for people that are not know well, but the agronomic techniques, sometimes we spray something on the trees, but it do not mean it's toxic for humans or environmental. So there are different kind of agrochemicals that not necessarily are productive for a huge company. Maybe sometimes it's like copper sulfate. It's some kind of rock, very fine grinded, that have some kind of protection over the trees. There are, for example, insecticides that we use in organics that is extracted from tree kind of tree nuts.
Different oils and things like that, right?
So they still are agrochemicals, but they are not as toxic as of other agrochemicals. There are different levels of that.
Something that, talking about rain, last year after the frost, and there was a lot of rain, and then there was a lot of flowering, and then there was a lot of rain again. And Judith Gaines posted a photo of how there was a lot of the flowers ended up on the ground. What happens in that situation? Because obviously flowers that are on the ground are not going to flower and turn into cherries. So are we seeing shifts in weather patterns that are becoming more permanent in their irregularity and causing these issues?
Yeah, this problem that some places face it was once related to this unstable rain and drought season. In Brazil, we usually have a very unique blossom season, or very concentrated. It's different for Colombia, that they have many multiple blossoms during the year. Usually in Brazil, we need that in order to make the harvest, because we can't do hand picking here. It's very, very expensive. So we need that. In this season, we have multiple blossoms because of this rain and drought that we have along the year since February. So beyond the lower yields that we are having, we have a multiple maturation, which is bad because it's really hard to do this kind of picking in Brazil.
It's labor intensive, right?
Yeah, it's when the coffee starts to blossom, I will take some pictures, and people will see like very mature, some very green, some are red, dried, because there's multiple blossom. Now everything is green, but during the maturation, they start to be different. And the next problem, that probably what Judith talks about too, it's about the side effects of frost. Because in some areas, we do not see the effects of frost in the trees. So the tree was not burned, but in some way, the physiology of the tree was affected. So in some areas, we could see like branches that are expecting to have flowers, but they do not sprout flowers. They sprout leaves or sprout nothing. And in other areas, we saw the sprouting of flowers, but the plant tree was very stressed from before. So the tree was not have enough energy to keep the flowers, so they put on the ground. So it's kind of side effects from frost and sometimes from drought that drain all the energy. I always said the tree is like I don't know the word, like a reservoir of energy.
Yeah.
Of energy. So the tree during the year decides what kind of use what kind of thing they're gonna do with this energy. Sprout leaves, roots, branches, flowers, but the energy is limited. It's how it is. So if we have a stress, for example, for drought or for frost, the plant uses the energy to survive, to transpirate, to do some physiological stuff. So in the end, when it got flowers, which is a huge drain of energy. So if there's not a lot of energy to go further, the tree puts the flowers down, or even do not sprout any flowers at all.
So the plant makes an executive decision and says, to borrow a term from the corporate world, that the plant makes an executive decision that perhaps it now needs to reset for this season, and it shuts itself down. And is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's everything that happens in the coffee tree or any plant is like biochemical stuff, but it's so perfect that is impressive how the plants take decisions for that, because the physiological decisions are related to climate, nutrients, and the plant state, but everything's work in a way that the plant kind of predict what it's gonna do. Okay, I don't
Right.
know, and I don't have enough energy to bear so many fruits, so I keep well for the next season or for the next time. I could sprout more flowers and could bear all my next generation here.
To wrap up this episode, I have perhaps a strange question to ask a coffee agronomist, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless. Is producing coffee prohibitive to the economic success of it?
I think I do not understand. Sorry.
So, given how difficult it is to manage the production of coffee, and given the challenges of how expensive it is for the inputs and how labor intensive coffee production is, and the changing weather patterns, keeping up to date with all of this, do you feel that coffee is going to be a crop that producers stick with, or are they going to look to either diversify or go to a completely different crop?
This is an interesting question, because in many areas in Brazil, there's no alternative than coffee, because in a steep area, steep, right?
Yep, in a high elevation area, in a steep.
When we grow coffee not in a flat land,
Yep.
but in the mountains, we can't grow corn there because
Right.
it's so much more expensive. Because you could grow that in a flat area, in other places in Brazil that you could use machines. So many coffee farmers many times think about, I should get out of coffee or diversify my production and try to grow other stuff, but it's really hard to change. Yeah.
Right.
So we could grow some fruits here, like avocados, for example. But I have to have someone to sell it, because it's not like coffee that I put on a bag, store in a warehouse and sit until 6 months and then fine and I export. No, if we start working with fruit, I have to harvest and sell it. I can't keep for a long time. So if we not have infrastructure and the knowledge to do that, the farmer will not do that. And this works for many perennial crops that are not very present in some coffee areas. So there is no alternative. Or all the farmers grow coffee or grow nothing, because grow coffee in like in Colombia or in some areas in Brazil is not cheap, because we need hand labor, and sadly, year by year, less people are interested in working in fields, because it's not easy. It's very complicated. We have sun, we have snakes, we have spiders, and we sometimes don't have a proper area to use the bathroom. And people don't think about that.
Right.
We have huge coffee lands. We put bathrooms in the coffee, like chemical bathrooms, but they are not close one with each other. Like if you go, or in the office, you just walk like 10 paces and you are in the bathroom. Sometimes people have to walk a little bit more to go in the simple thing, like go to the bathroom. If you like your food heat, we need to put in a kind of thermos, because there are no microwave oven in the fields. So it's just small things that make people that are not like interested in go to the work in the fields, and the wage is not very good. Because if the farmer are not making a lot of money, like usually small and medium farmers, they don't have enough conditions to pay high salaries for this this workers. I talked with many family farmers, with some of that I work, and they said I really want to pay more money for my harvest in order to keep them with me, but I have a maximal price that I could get in order to pay my bills too, and give health and education to my children, because it's not just about what I'm earning now. Like people said, okay, farmers are get money now, but they don't know if in the next year they're gonna get money. So now they have opportunity or to invest this money because it's a company like other companies. They need, or they use the money to invest, or they save that money because the next year maybe they are gonna lose money because of the commodity prices
Or
go up and
fertilizer
down.
goes up 300%.
So it's really hard to manage
Mm.
economics in the farm. The farmer it's not have a well knowledge about economics in the
Yep.
farm because it's not part of what they need to do. They need to produce coffee, but it's really hard to deal with something that we don't know. They don't know what the price will be in the future.
Yep.
It's like start a coffee shop and you don't know how the price you're gonna sell your cup of
Of coffee.
cappuccino, for
Yeah.
example, or coffee. So you buy the raw material, but someone say, okay, you need to sell your cup of coffee for $1, no matter if it costs like
No matter
two
what the
dollars.
cost is.
Yeah, it's like that in the coffee field. So they have to wait until someone say the price is that. That is important to have like agroforestry, specialty, and organic, because usually the buyers from these segments are more aware of the price problem in the
And the
field. So
supply
they are
chain.
more willing to pay a little bit more or much more about the coffee because they understand there are a lot of things related to give this price. So one thing that interesting for me, at least in Brazil, that I saw in specialty chain,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually farmers say how much it costs its bag
Oh,
of
that's
coffee to the buyer.
awesome.
Yeah, this is interesting because it's still a not a big market.
It's not a big market, but it's growing.
Yeah, it's growing. So it's still more fair than the commodity market.
Right. Right. Jonas, this has been really enlightening. These 5 conversations that we've had. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens to Brazil over the next 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the frost of last year. And also, something we didn't talk about is the growing Robusta industry that seems to be doing
Mm-hmm.
very, very well with
Mm-hmm.
record prices. And just the geopolitical landscape of 2022 seems to be like it's going to throw a few spanners in the works. So no doubt you will be back you will humble us by accepting another invitation onto the podcast. Who knows what this year is going to bring from a climate change perspective as well. But thank you for being here. Will you remind everyone where they can find you on social media?
And thank you everyone that listened to me today. I love to be in touch with people and coffee people, since drinkers and to roasters, farmers, and trader. I think a good chain is made of everyone that are understanding which part and sometimes dealing with one with another. We could not win all the time. So should the chain be good, it's not just about the farmers get a lot of money. This is not the solution. The solution is we have a fair chain for everyone, because nobody will pay $10 for a cup of coffee. So the balance is important. So if everyone want to read something that I wrote in some coffee media and get in touch with me, I'm on Instagram as Jonas Coffee Agronomist. And I'm on Twitter too, and LinkedIn too. So I always do different approach in each social media, platform. So in Instagram is my daily routine in the coffee field. In the LinkedIn, I talk a little bit of science and coffee, about nutrients and coffee physiology and coffee market. So if you're interested in one of these 2 lines, you are free to reach me, and we could have a good conversation there.
I get told by people all the time that they want to reach out and speak to you, but they're intimidated to reach out to you. So if you're listening to this and you are one of those people that said to me, gosh, I'd love to meet Jonas, he is giving you the opportunity and saying, please reach out. So please don't hesitate. As you can see, he's very approachable. And we will include links to LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram in the show notes. Thank you again, my friend. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was fantastic. And I'm always open to new conversation.
Fantastic. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. I hope that you've enjoyed this series with Jonas. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.